I just wanted to say thanks so much for having me here and for interviewing me. I'm really excited about the work that we're doing at OCD Acceptance, and just really impressed with Bowen and all of his work that he does there, and the endless amount of time and hours and effort he puts in. So really thankful for that. Allow me to introduce myself. Again, my name is Angie Alexander. My friends call me Alex. Basically, I was diagnosed with obsessive compulsive disorder last year in November 13th of 2015. Basically, I have suffered from OCD my entire life. It started probably when I was about 7 years old. I was really concerned with health just throughout my whole life. Basically, I was just hypersensitive to generally everything, especially health-related things, things that children that don't have obsessive compulsive disorder aren't concerned with. So basically, I've suffered all my life. My parents didn't know. No one knew what was going on with me. My mom just thought I was a sensitive child. So after the birth of my first son, I started getting intrusive thoughts, and that was new to me. I didn't have intrusive thoughts. I just kind of had intense worry up until that point. 19 years old, my son just turned a year, and I started having intrusive thoughts. I was afraid that I was going to hurt him, and so basically, I was terrified, and I didn't tell anybody because I thought that I was crazy. I thought other people would think that I was crazy. So I just didn't say anything, and I just lived like that, and I was afraid to be alone with him, and so I didn't want to be left alone with him, or I didn't want to be around sharp objects or things that I could potentially cause harm with. So I lived like that. It got better through time, but because I didn't seek treatment, and I didn't have any help, no medication, no support from family or friends because I didn't tell anybody, I just kind of lived alone in silence for 14 years. 5 children altogether. I have 5 children. After the birth of my 5th child, I started getting really intense intrusive thoughts again, and it got so intense that I couldn't eat, I couldn't sleep. I homeschool. It was very hard to homeschool my children. I was really concerned that life was going to end for me. I was concerned I was going to go to jail or be in a mental institution. I thought my children were going to get taken away. I talked to lots of mommies who struggle with this. So if you are struggling with this, or if you know someone else who's struggling with this, I just encourage you to get educated and to really understand what you're going through so that you can, number one, understand it so that you can overcome it, and to help others understand it. I specifically struggle with pure obsessive compulsive disorder, and basically what that is that's purely obsessional. So if I was diagnosed, so many specialists don't really understand pure O because I have no outward compulsions. So what that means is I think, well, I wrote some notes. So basically, obsessions from someone that has pure O, pure obsessional compulsive disorder, is they can have some, so some of the themes are like harming others or themselves. You can have relationship fears, fear of things going on in your relationship. You can be afraid of your sexual orientation. You can be afraid of things happening in the past. You can be afraid of possibly doing things in the past or other people doing things in the past. And what the compulsions look like for those things is basically you can seek reassurance, which was one of the big ones for me. So what happens is I'll get an obsession. A thought will pop into my head, I can hurt my child. So instead of doing something outward, what I do is in my mind, I start to perform compulsions to make me feel clean because those thoughts make me feel unclean or dirty. So basically what I do is I attempt to cleanse my mind of that thought. So what I can do is I can do something that's like replacing the thought. I can take the bad thought and replace it with a good thought, and to kind of try to counter the bad thoughts. Or I can try to reassure myself. So I'll have an obsessive thought and I'll say, no, I'm not a bad person, or I would never do that, or only moms that are crazy do that, or so I'll try to say things to help talk myself out of the anxiety that that thought is producing. So that's reassurance. Or I could seek reassurance from others around me. So I can go to my husband and I can say, do you think that I could ever possibly harm someone? Or, just subtle ways. They might not know what I'm struggling with. So I did that for a really long time, especially because my main theme was harm OCD, where I was afraid that I was going to harm specifically my children, not so much anybody else, but just mainly my children. So because I didn't tell anybody because I was afraid, I would find subtle ways to, I would avoid the news. I would avoid being alone with them. My husband didn't know what was going on inside of my mind. And so I would say things to try to not let on to my suffering, but to help him, like to reassure myself through him, basically. So I would ask him, like, do you think I'm crazy? Or do you think I'm sane and normal? Like, and somebody would come on the news, like a woman who killed her children or something. And I would be like, well, are there similarities? Like, so he kind of always acted bewildered. He didn't really understand. And the thing that makes it so odd for people who have pure O is that, so we don't have any observable compulsions. That's like, that defines pure O. But the thoughts are so troubling because they're so antithetical to our character and our values. They're the complete opposite of what we do. So because I love my children so much, I struggled with harm thoughts. OCD can attack any area of your life. It doesn't have to be, it doesn't even have to be things that you love. It can be anything. I have lots of women messaging me, asking me, is this a normal theme, or is this OCD? Is this considered OCD? Anything can be OCD if you care about it. If it comes into your mind, if it can be articulated in a thought, it can be an obsession. So basically I suffered with that for 14 years in silence, and the harm OCD. Till finally I just decided I can't live like this anymore, and I became really desperate. And so I started Googling my symptoms, and I Googled the term intrusive thoughts, and found an intrusive thought specialist and went to her. And I remember her telling me that she really felt like it wasn't so much that I wanted to hurt my children, but that I resented them and that I just needed to be away from them more, because I'm a stay-at-home mom of 5 children and I homeschool. And so she just assumed that I needed time out because my brain wasn't working the way it should or something. I needed more adult time. But in my spirit, like in my heart, I didn't feel like that was the case. And I remember quoting this to her. I remember telling her, I don't pray for a lighter load, but for a stronger back. I don't want to have to change my circumstances and do all of this talking, this traditional talk therapy to overcome what I'm dealing with. I feel like it's something more. And then I went back to searching, and I found the term obsessive compulsive disorder. And so I took it to her, and she's a specialist in intrusive thoughts. She says she comes across these women all the time who are just like me. So I took it to her and I said, I found this obsessive compulsive disorder term. And she just reassured me, you don't have obsessive compulsive disorder. You're not organizing things. You're not washing your hands obsessively. She's a specialist. She went to school for years and years, right? Sees women like me all the time, had no idea that I had obsessive compulsive disorder, and would have treated it with traditional talk therapy, which doesn't work for obsessive compulsive disorder. The gold standard for treatment is exposure and response prevention therapy. So we were kind of at an impasse because I knew that I had it. So I found somebody who specialized in obsessive compulsive disorder, and just a couple of weeks of treatment, I knew that that's absolutely what I had. I found a therapist who did Skype online, and my whole entire life changed. I recognized the tools that were most helpful to me that I want to share with you is really thoughts, the the thoughts that for me, it was the biggest thing was what I felt, how I believe, what I believed about my thoughts. Um, when that changed, when I was able to see a thought as kind of a benign, not even an object, but just this benign thing that only exists inside of my mind, when I was able to fully see it like that, um, everything changed for me. So thoughts are just thoughts. And as people said it to me, I kind of didn't really embrace it or understand it. It didn't make any sense. I read this book, and I'm sure many of you have heard of it. It's called The Mindfulness Workbook for OCD. It's by John Hirschfield, and there it is. There's many more books that I really recommend, but this one by far is has been the most helpful for me. John Hirschfield teaches how to articulate in my own mind what's going on, what my condition is. He explains it very well. And so I'm able to understand in a real way how to communicate with my condition. So that just means I've learned to be more fluid with what's happening. It's not that the thoughts go away. It's not that I've learned this way to fight them stronger and harder so that I'm winning. It's that I've just accepted. It's just this general, and I know with OCD, we hear this all the time, right? Acceptance, acceptance is the key that unlocks every obsession, but it's true. When I started fully allowing the thoughts to just be present, instead of running away from them, instead of trying to replace them with thoughts that I thought were good or better, when I started really allowing myself to sit with the thoughts, that's when everything changed for me. That's when my recovery started. So now I still have intrusive thoughts every now and then, but they don't bother me because I recognize that really they're just ones and zeros. Thoughts mean nothing. And the feelings that I have, especially for women, it's hard to overcome an obsession because of the strong emotion that's attached to it, especially women who suffer from things like harm OCD and pedophilia OCD. Those are really, all themes, every theme is super hard, and anxiety is anxiety. No matter how you're experiencing it, it all really just sucks, right? But for me, I've experienced harm OCD. And I talk to many girls who experience pedophilia OCD, also known as POCD, and the intense emotion that comes along with that is so overwhelming that it feels like you're trapped, and it feels like you don't really have a choice in what you're experiencing. So through the Mindfulness Workbook and through Freedom from Obsessive Compulsive Disorder by Dr. Grayson, I learned how to respond to my thoughts. I learned how to react to my thoughts, which actually isn't to react at all. I've learned how to become more fluid with my experience with OCD. So that just means that when I have an obsessive compulsive, when the cycle begins, when a thought comes into my mind, I allow it to be there for as long as it needs to be there. And I recognize it, and then I continue gently with what I'm doing. So I can see the thought now as just a thought instead of a threat. And the feelings that I experience are because of what I believe about that thought. So if I have a thought, my heart starts to race and I feel like I might have a heart attack. The thought I might have a heart attack and I might die is very alarming and frightening, really, to anybody, but especially to those of us with OCD. So the way that you respond to that thought is what causes the emotion that feels either overwhelming or not overwhelming. Especially with me with harm thoughts, I would have a thought I could harm my child. And what I had to do is I had to take that thought and allow it to be there instead of saying, yes, I could harm my child, and then try to do things to avoid that. I just had to recognize that it was just a thought, that it couldn't hurt me. Thoughts are so far away from behavior. A thought can't make you do anything. It doesn't change anything. It doesn't create any sort of reality. A thought is just a thought. So for me, that was really the biggest, the biggest step in my recovery was recognizing what a thought is and how I am supposed to relate to that. So some of the ways that I suffer now still, because because obsessive compulsive disorder is chronic. So there's technically no cure for obsessive compulsive disorder, although there's great treatment available. Um, so CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, coupled with exposure and response prevention therapy, along with some people choose to take medication. I've never taken medication myself, but I probably, looking back now, should have considered medication. But I know many people who are helped by it hugely. So now what I do is I continue to maintain, I go back and I read the material. And because I run 3 support groups, and I also do 2 support groups on Skype, and I help mainly other mommies who suffer from intrusive thoughts and obsessive compulsive disorder, I'm constantly going over the material because I'm helping others. So I think for me, that really keeps it fresh in my mind, so that I don't I think sometimes what I've noticed with some of the girls I've helped, they kind of distance themselves from the obsessive compulsive disorder after they've overcome. And I think that's okay. I think we all just have to be so gracious with how we experience life and this journey with obsessive compulsive disorder. So I think it's great, whatever we feel like we need to do. Personally, I think that dispelling some of the error about obsessive compulsive disorder, I think just being open and honest about my illness has helped me in recovering from it. Helping people to understand how I perceive life and how I've experienced it has really been freeing and enabling for me as an individual. So those are some of the things that I've done to overcome. And so as I help other mommies overcome, I think that the principles that I've learned, they really work. And that's when we apply them, when we look at them, when we choose to do them, when we choose healing and hope over fear, really big, great things happen. And so I want to encourage you, if you're a sufferer, or if you know someone who's suffering from obsessive compulsive disorder, there's hope. 14 years is a really long time to suffer from an illness that you know nothing about and all alone. And so if anybody was hopeless, it probably would have been me, right? And there's so much hope, and I'm so thankful that men are stepping up and women are stepping up, and they're going to the front lines and they're educating people. I know lots of amazing people who are spreading knowledge and truth about mental illness in general. And Bowen's one of those people. Chrissy Hodges, Shannon Shy, John Hirschfield, Dr. Grayson. I know so many great, amazing people who've helped me in my journey. And so I just want to encourage you. These tools work. Self-help books like Freedom from Obsessive Compulsive Disorder by Dr. Grayson, the Mindfulness Workbook for OCD by John Hirschfield. These books are life-changing. If you apply the principles faithfully, you can overcome this illness. You'll have to continue to maintain the principles and apply the techniques that you've learned, but by and large, you can live just like somebody without obsessive compulsive disorder, and for that, I'm just really thankful. So thanks so much for listening in. And if you have obsessive compulsive disorder, feel free to find me on Facebook. I started a group called Friends with OCD. You're welcome to join us there. And that's it.